Hi guys, so let's get on a journey to creating this beautiful piece and this trendy gown that comes with the side gathers, and I added sleeves to mine. So let's go right to the journey. So this is the pattern paper I'll be working with, and I just came down by 1 inch because I didn't want to start from the tip of the paper. So I'll be taking my measurement from this on 1 inch. So my shoulder is 15 divided by 2. I marked out 7.5. And for the neckline, I'll be marking out 3 inches. So for the shoulder slant, I'll be coming down by 1 inch. So I'll go ahead and use my ruler to draw the slanted line for the shoulder slope. So now I'll be taking my armhole length. For mine, this is 7.5. If you don't know your armhole length, you could take your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. And my bust is that 6 divided by 6, which is 6 plus 1.5, which is 7.5. So I'll go down and also take that 7.5 I measured for the shoulder so I can get a straight line. And I'll also draw the horizontal line on that point. So I'll label that the bust line. So I'll also go ahead and take every vertical measurement. My nipple point, which is 10, my under bust, which is 13. I'll go ahead and mark out my half length. I used 16 for my half length. Also go ahead and mark out my hip length, which I used 24 inches. So I also go ahead and mark out how long I want the gown to be. I want mine to be 35 inches long. So I also go ahead and add the extra 1 inch for folding allowance. I'll add that on the pattern paper, which made it 36. So I go ahead and use my ruler and marker to draw out the straight line on all the vertical points I have marked out. So I'm done with marking out those points. I'll go ahead and label which this is my nipple point, my under bust, my waistline, my hip line, and my full length. So now I'll go ahead and take the midpoint of this 7.5, which is 3.25, and right from that 3.25 I'll mark half inch inward, and this is to prevent the gaping of the armhole. I also take out my bust. My bust is 36 divided by 6, which is 9. So I'll go ahead and draw the armhole curve. So we go in by half inch inwards to prevent the gaping of the armhole side. So I'll be going ahead to take my nipple to nipple, which is 4 inches. And right from that 4 inches, I'll also be adding half inch sewing allowance, which made it 4.5. And I've added my sewing allowance from my nipple point to this pattern paper. You can decide not to add your own sewing allowance. I don't want to forget. So which I've marked out 4 inches from my nipple to nipple, which is 8. So your nipple to nipple, you divide it by 2. So I add 8 divided by 2, which is 4. I also go ahead and mark out half inch at my waistline. And at the other side, I'll be taking 1.25. You can decide to make yours 1.5 for a big bust. So I made my 1.25, and I also go ahead and mark out that 1.25 at the under bust and mark out half inch at the other side. If you have a bigger bust from bust 38, I advise you take 1 inch on the side and 1.5 to 2 inch on the other side. So right from this nipple to nipple, I'm coming down by 1 inch, and I came down by 1 inch to prevent these curvy points, so that it could relax well on my bust. Because if you don't come down by 1 inch, you see that it's pointing out the nipple and it is not resting well on your bust. So based on how low you want it to be, I want mine to be 6.5 inches. You could make your 7 inches, 8 inches based on how exposed you want it to be. And so at this point, I'll also go ahead and mark out that 4.5 inch, which I've marked on this side, and I'll be marking it on this side. So I'll go ahead and use my ruler to connect it together. So for my bust tightening, I'll be taking 3.4 on this point and also 3/4 at the other side, and I'll also go ahead and join them together. You could use half inch on both sides, 1 inch on both sides, depending on how big your bust is. So right here, I want to come down by 1 inch. You can try to come down by 2 inches, 1.5 inch, based on how exposed you want it to be. So you go ahead and give it that Queen Anne neckline. So now I want it to be a full Bustier, so I'll be marking out that 4.5 which I've taken on the side. I'll mark it out at my waistline. I also mark that 4.5 out on my full length. I'll go ahead and use a ruler to connect both lines together at both vertical lines. So now this point which I've marked at half inch and 1.25, I'll also be marking it out. I'll mark out the half inch on the left hand side and the 1.25 on the right hand side. I also go ahead to do the same thing, half inch and 1.25 inch. So you go ahead and make use of your ruler and cut. So you do that at all points. So I'm done marking out those points. Now I'll be going ahead to taking my horizontal measurements. Now I have marked out 3/4 inch in two places, gives us 1.5. I'll also go ahead and mark out that 1.5 which I have taken. I'll be taking it from that armhole which I've drawn. I'll mark out that 1.5 because since I'll be cutting that 1.5 out, I need to add it so I don't get short of fabrics. So as you can see, I have 3.5 here, and on this side I have 4 inch, which is equivalent back to like 7.5 inches. So now for the underbust, my underbust is 36 divided by 6, which is 9. So this is my 9 I've marked out. And from this, I'll mark out the 9 inches. And don't forget, I've marked out, I'll be moving 1 inch on the side. I'll mark out that 1 inch on the side because it is not up to 1.5. So now I also want to add all my allowances here. So remember, I'll be taking half inch on both sides for the joining. So half inch plus half inch gives us 1 inch. So I'll add that 1 inch. Then I'll also be adding my extra 1 inch for my sewing allowance. So going ahead to take my waist measurement. My waist is 30 divided by 4, which is 7.5. So remember, I went ahead to take about in total 1.75. So I approximated it to 2 inches. So 7.5 plus 2 inches is 9.5 inch. And also going to be taking 1 inch for sewing them together, which gives me 10.5 plus extra 1 inch allowance, which is equivalent to 11.5. So I'll go ahead and connect from the bust down to the waist. So back to the armhole, in order not to be short of fabric, remember I came out by 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and on this side, by the time we are done joining or cutting out that part, we'll be short of fabric. So we need to create a new armhole. So from that armhole, you also mark out that 1.5 inch, which you've marked up, and you create your new armhole. Because you've already cut out those inch for the dart, so you need to replace those inches you had cut out for the darts. So I'll be coming down to the hip line. My hip is 38 divided by 4, which is 9.5. And since I've taken 2 inches for my dart line, I'll be adding it, and also 1 inch for sewing them together, and also 1 extra inch for sewing allowance. So I'll go ahead and connect that. So I went ahead and adjust it because I made some mistakes. So I went ahead to adjust my hip line, but I won't necessarily be needing this shape. So I went ahead on adjusting the hip line. So at this point now, based on how wide you want your queen ant to be, I want mine to be 2 inches. So I marked out 2 inches, and I went ahead to use my ruler to create the queen ant neckline, which is slanted for the neckline down to the armhole. So, and also you'll be going up by half inch, and going up by half inch and is because I want to prevent bulging at the armhole by the time I'm done sewing. So going up by half inch cuts out the bulging. So go ahead and come down by 1 inch from my waistline, and from my hip line, I'll be coming down by 3 inches. So I want my Basque to start 1 inch from my waistline. So I'll go ahead and use my ruler to create that Basque effect. That is the slanted line. So by the time I'm done doing this. So I've cut it out off camera. So you can see I did not cut out the Basque pattern, because if I'd cut it out, they would not align since I am taking off the dart. If you're not going to give it a dart until the hip line, you could just cut it out. So you can see by the time I'm joining it together, you can see they are not aligning. because of the dart we have removed. So now I will have to create the line to align it back. So make sure you don't cut out your basque, or rather still you don't draw it out. You make sure you are done cutting before you draw it out. So you can see now I have amended the Basque effect. So I'll now go ahead and take my scissors to cut it. So by the time you're joining, make sure those both lines align with each other by the time you want to add your tape to it, because those lines have to meet. So by the time you notice those lines are meet, you go ahead and use your paper tape to pin it down. So I am done doing this, and you gently go ahead and remove your paper tape. We have to do this gently. So we are done with the front, and this is what the front looks like. This is what it looks like after I am done. So going to the back, I've marked out 1.5 each for my zipper allowance. I'll go ahead and mark 7.5 for my shoulder, and I come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant, and I mark out also 3 inches for my neckline. I'll go ahead and use my ruler to draw the slanted line. So I also go ahead and mark out my 7.5 for my armhole, just as that which I've done at the front. I also do it to the back, and I also create the same armhole I've done at the front. I'll do the same right to the back. So now I'll be taking my vertical measurement, but I don't need my nipple point, so I'm not taking just my half length, which is 16, my hip line, which is 24, and my full length, which is 36. So I'll go ahead and also take my bust, which is 9 inches, and also mark out the midpoint of the armhole, which is 3.25, but you don't need to go in by half inch since this is the back. So now go ahead and take my horizontal measurement. My bust line is 9 inches plus 1 inches for the sewing allowance, which makes it 10 inches. So I'll go ahead and take my waist measurement. My waist is 7.5 inches. So 7.5 inches plus extra 1 inch, which is 8.5 inches. For the waist, I am not taking any dart at the waistline, so that is why I didn't add my dart allowance. So and also I'm gonna have to take my hip measurements. I'll go ahead and use my ruler to connect that line together. At my hip, which is 9.5 inches plus 1 extra inch sewing allowance, which makes it 10.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark out and draw the shape of my bodice. So now we are done with this. So for the neckline at the back, I came down by 1 inch. So I also go ahead and mark out my neckline. So this is what the neckline looks like after I am done. So I also go ahead and measure how deep I want the back to be. I want mine to be 13 inches. I want it to be very deep. If you don't want it to be very deep, just go ahead and take 10 inches, just as that which you have on the video. But I want mine to be very deep. This is going to give you a very deep neckline. So for the button at the back, I'll be coming down by 1.5 inch. You can decide to come down by 2 inch if you want it wider, but I want mine to be 1.5 inch. And how deep I want the effect to be at the back, I'll be coming out by 1 inch on this side. If you don't want yours to be very deep, I advise you go out by 3 inches. So I'll go ahead and create the effect I want. But if you want that as the exact thing in that video, I'll advise you make the back length just 9 to 10 inches, and from the armhole you come out by 3 inches. That will give you the exact back effect which you have on that video. But mine, I wanted it to be very deep, and I wanted my back to be very, very exposed, because I wanted to give it this exposed back effect, and I wanted to give it I wanted to like recreate that back line a little bit. So you go ahead and draw the shape. For me, this is what I want the shape of the back to look like. So I also I went ahead to readjust it because I want it to come up a little bit. So this back is based on how deep and wide you want it to be. So for the back from my waist, I'll come down by 1 inch, and from my hip line, I'll be coming down by also 3 inch. Just the same thing I have done at the front. So you go ahead and create your Basque effects. So you could also go ahead and do this, or you just go ahead and use your front pattern paper which you've done. You can just place the front Basque you formed at the front, place it at the back for you to mark out your back Basque. But you can see either way still gives me the same thing. So based on how you want to do it, so either way is fine. So I'm done with this, so I'll just go ahead and cut these bodies out. So by the time I'm done drafting out my pattern. So I'll be in my next video, I'll be dropping a sewing tutorial on how I made this and the final look. Stay tuned, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video to the end, and stay tuned as I'll be dropping a video tutorial on how to sew this dress. And I still remain your hair and fashion channel. I'll also be dropping tutorials on hair and fashion every week. Love you all.